Yeah, happy Friday, everybody. I hope you all made it through the week relatively unscathed. Welcome back to DEGREELESSNESS. I'm your host, Shanghai Pete. Seems the industry is having a rough go of it recently, doesn't it? Yes, between the biggest game release of the year not being from a so-called AAA studio, receipts for Final Fantasy XVI's disappointing numbers coming to light, and Rockstar being perhaps even more anti-consumer than usual, the game industry corpos have definitely got some sand in their collective vaginas.
What's the matter? You got some sand in your vagina? No, I don't have sand in my vagina.
We love that for them. Let's get deep inside. Just time for a quick recap of the week, and once again, the gaming industry's idiocy and crimes against its supporters, us, did not disappoint. And let's start with Square Enix's continued struggles with Final Fantasy XVI. Now, as recently as last month, they were very quick to enact damage control when stories reporting the game's lackluster sales numbers began to pop up all across the media landscape. And as we reported at the time, Square's rebuttals didn't exactly match the actual facts of the situation, inconveniently enough, and in many cases only served to make them come across rather panicky about the whole thing. Well, now we know why, and if you'll allow me, I told you so. As it turns out, all those outlets reporting Final Fantasy XVI sales numbers as a disappointment for Square Enix weren't so crazy after all. Imagine that. Sure, maybe the install base played a part in the amount of copies moved. Sure, maybe previous series entries did benefit from being on the PS4. But if that's the case, no one told the fucking market that, as their shares just saw their worst intraday drop in almost 3 years. Womp womp, poor corpos. But Shanghai Pete, you may be thinking, how can you be sure that this has anything to do with Final Fantasy XVI sales numbers? Well, because market analysts had that same question, and the answer they got was in the form of Square's earnings report from Wednesday, which showed a disastrous 79% drop in operating profit. And according to Square Enix president Takashi Kiryu, that was largely a result of Final Fantasy XVI launch sales, quote, not meeting the high end of the company's expectations, end quote. So, is that definitive enough for everybody? Personally, I couldn't give fuck one how well Final Fantasy XVI or any game sold it. Plays no part in my enjoyment, I don't care. But unlike the Final Fantasy series, tribal internet battles over whose Corpo daddy is best show no signs of losing popularity, so this kind of thing remains something people want addressed. Well, there we go. I hope everybody's satisfied. I was right again. I may not give a shit about sales numbers, but I do care about being proven correct. Moving on. Looks like Rockstar has slithered their way back into the sights of video game enthusiasts and industry hobbyists. Apparently not satisfied with the assault on everyone's wallets that they perpetrated with the legendarily catastrophic Grand Theft Auto Definitive Edition trilogy, they are back once again to violate fans and customers alike. Rejoice. This time, they've got a new plan. That's right, they've learned from the mistakes that they made with the GTA Definitive Edition, and now they're back to fuck on us all over again. Now, for months, rumors have swirled around something new from the Red Dead franchise. Would it be a brand new game? Maybe an expansion for Red Dead 2, or perhaps a remake, maybe a remaster of the first Red Dead game. After all, it's still not available on PC. I wonder why that is. More on that later. This week, Rockstar finally unveiled the big Red Dead Redemption news. Oh, hooray! Looks like it's coming to both PlayStation 4 and Nintendo Switch, two technically last-gen systems. Great, I guess. So that's certainly good news, though, right? So is it a remaster? The game's over a decade old, after all. How's the multiplayer support? Are they doing a resolution upscale? What about all the online DLC packs? It's gotta at least be supporting 60 frames per second, right? It's a 13-year-old game. And even if not, I'm sure it'll be pretty cheap though, right? Shit, you can still get it on some of the Xbox systems for only $30. Let's check out the feature list and find out. 60 frames per second? No. Remaster? No. Any graphical updates? No. Multiplayer support? No. Online DLC? No. It's just the bare bones stock version of the game from 2010 running at 30 frames a second. 13 years later. That'll be $50 fucking please. And these companies wonder why everyone fucking hates them. Amazing. Alright, so it's just a bare bones port with no multiplayer, running at 30 frames per second after more than a decade. I mean, it can't be all bad, right? This must have, at the very least, been a labor of love for Rockstar, right? Surely they've learned from their disastrous mistakes with the GTA trilogy. And knowing how beloved this game is for so many fans, this time they've made sure to dedicate significant resources to the project, ensuring that the disaster that happened last time will never occur again and that it lives up to the expectations of their loyal customers and is the best possible port it could be, right? They wouldn't, I don't know, have absolutely nothing to do with it and instead just farm it out to some rando studio whose biggest claims to fame are Fallout 76 assets and a port of Little Big Planet for the PlayStation Vita, right? I mean, they would never do that, would they?
I think so.
Wow, Rockstar, you continue to exceed even your own accomplishments as a machine built on human suffering. But wait, it gets even worse. Now, you may have noticed that I didn't mention that a PC port was among the platforms announced. That's because there is no PC port, at least not yet. Why is that, you may be thinking? Well, it's for the same reason that they shut down and removed the original versions of the GTA trilogy before putting out cum shower versions. Mods. PC versions of games and their mod scenes are notoriously difficult to control once they're out there. Console games, not so much. Rockstar does not want normal home users making mods, at least not yet. Why? Well, simply put, because modders make stuff for free that the studio would normally try to sell to you. Plus, historically, mods tend to easily outshine studio releases and put a spotlight on just how laughably low effort most official garbage is. AAA studios like Rockstar are very aware of how difficult it is to sell a remaster for full price when they're made to look ridiculous by hundreds of homebrew mods available for free that do the same thing and do it much, much better. That's why Sega canned the original official Sonic games before releasing their quote-unquote updated versions. That's why Rockstar got rid of the original GTA trilogy releases. It's standard operating procedure at this point. As a huge corpo, you cannot have homebrew kids and their free time making you look like a clown when you try to drop absurd, insulting ports for full price. That's a comparison they do not want and can't afford. Eventually, I'm sure they will release a PC port though, because as inconvenient as mod scenes can be, they can also be taken advantage of to extend the lifespan of a game at effectively no cost to the original developer or studio, only to inevitably be shut down when those same studios decide that, oh, it's time to ride the ground up enthusiasm created by fans all the way to their next low-effort port, which will, of course, conveniently not support the mod scene that made the market for the new port possible in the first place. Like I always say, Rockstar is the Apple of the video game industry. Even though most people hate them, and rightly so, they still pull out their wallets to buy whatever their new thing is, even if it looks exactly the same as something you've already given them money for 13 years ago. The copium for this one's gonna be rough, guys. Now, for our main story tonight, let's talk about expectations and how the utterly dismal state of this industry has collapsed to the point where, according to Corpos, there is now such a thing as a game being too good. No, you guys are just terrified that this might make it harder for you to continue selling shit games while desperately insisting that they're actually good. Yes, I, like many of you, have been playing a lot of Baldur's Gate 3 this week, but as awesome as that game is, its release has had a surprising and delightful side effect that I may be enjoying slightly more than actually playing the game itself. And that is watching the industry panic and squirm as they rush to make excuses for how pathetic all the low-effort slop that they've been trying to sell us now looks in comparison. It's awesome. See, just like how the industry can't allow a game as big as a mainline Final Fantasy entry to fail, it also can't abide any studio releasing a game that reminds their customers what an actual good game looks like. They can't have that, because if people remember what truly good games are like, then legacy media outlets and status quo defenders won't be able to continue getting away with selling and marketing garbo games to us by simply slapping a 7 on them saying no further questions and calling it a day. Yes, guys and gals, the Corpo Cope this week has been delicious, spawning amazing headlines like these. Baldur's Gate 3 is exciting and worrying game developers. Why devs consider Baldur's Gate 3 an anomaly and not a new standard for the RPG genre. Baldur's Gate 3 should not set the standard for role-playing games, warns game developers. And my personal favorite, Ubisoft's upcoming Star Wars Outlaws prides itself on not being an unfinishable 300-hour RPG. Wow. So now they're trying to tell us making a shit game with a padded runtime and a minimum viable product design philosophy is not actually anti-consumer and deceptive, but instead a point of pride. Good luck with that, guys. Let me know how that works out for you. This shit is fucking amazing. They're so panicked, they're going full mask off. Now, the core of the concern is well summarized in this absolutely unhinged Twitter thread, and it's fucking hysterical, so we're gonna go through it. This guy has Corpo devs so riled up, even people from the big boys like Diablo 4 designers are chiming in to desperately try to slow the onset of the inconceivable horror of having standards. It begins with this fucking incredible thesis. Like a lot of people, I'm deeply excited about what the lovely folks at Larian accomplished with Baldur's Gate 3, but I want to gently, preemptively push back against players taking that excitement and using it to apply criticism or a raised standard to RPGs going forward. Oh my god. That's just fucking awesome. Just coming out and pointing out the dev kryptonite right out of the gate. Just straight up saying, this is what we are most afraid of. If there's two things that we absolutely cannot have under any circumstances, two things that we simply will not tolerate in any form, in any amount, for any reason, it's criticism and raised standards. God forbid, the horror. Talk about mask off, holy fucking shit. If this statement alone doesn't completely validate and justify like my entire thesis against the modern gaming industry, I don't know if anything ever will. Like, I do not understand how you can begin your commentary with a statement as obviously transparent and deranged as this, and then expect to be taken seriously. It's fucking madness that people have this kind of confidence and blind temerity to just straight up lick Corpo boots on the timeline in front of everybody like shame is a concept that's been lost to history, which, I mean, I suppose it sort of has to some extent, to be fair, but okay, buddy, sure, I'll indulge you. Why can't Baldur's Gate 3 be used to apply criticism or a raised standard? Well, you can't separate a game from the process used to build it, so let's look at what Larian is taking into the development and final version of this game. Number 1, dev cycle stretching back to 2017. 2 massive games and their definitive editions worth of tech and institutional knowledge to draw from. 3, super successful early access period lasting 3 years, providing crucial community feedback, bug hunting, and cash flow. Number 4, over 400 developers in 7 different offices around the world. Number 5, the licensed brand and world of one of the largest entertainment IPs, Dungeons & Dragons, at the apex of its popularity with the rise of the actual play movement and a movie. Whew, all right, let's address these point by point. Number 1, dev cycle stretching all the way back to 2017. Yes, a 5-year dev cycle. We get it. What's so crazy about that? Plenty of AAA games are in development for that long or longer all the time. So what? I can name multiple games with dev cycles that long just from this year. FF16, Diablo 4, Tears of the Kingdom. Need I go on? Number 2, 2 massive games and their definitive editions worth of tech and institutional knowledge to draw from, blah, blah, blah. Again, so what? Name a big AAA developer that doesn't have access to the same amount of content or more to draw from. Especially these days when studios don't tend to survive long enough to become AAA developers unless they have already put out a minimum of 2 massive, successful games. Number 3, super successful early access period lasting 3 years, providing crucial community feedback, bug hunting, and cash flow. Like, this is just a self-report. Imagine trying to paint a developer obtaining community feedback and fixing bugs in a game prior to release as some insane pie-in-the-sky, impossible standard to meet. This is basically just confirming stuff that we've all always suspected but never had any actual proof of until now. Lax quality control standards, systemic ignoring of community feedback, knowingly releasing buggy unfinished games. Yeah, that sounds exactly like a AAA studio to me. You're suggesting that we pay attention to the feedback of our customers whose money keeps us in business? That's insane. You want us to actually fix bugs before we release the game? Don't be ridiculous. That's fucking crazy. Yeah, you guys think that's crazy and you want us to think that's crazy as well. We know. That's why we fucking hate you and say you ruined our fucking hobby, you useless fucking Corpo bloodsuckers. This guy is single-handedly proving every point that I've ever made over the last few years. Let's keep going. Number 4, he says, over 400 developers in 7 different offices around the world. I'm not saying that's not a big number. It is. 400 people's a fucking lot. But how big is it compared to other large studios and comparably large games? Let's take a look. Final Fantasy XIII, all the way back in 2009, had a team of over 200 people. Final Fantasy XV had well over 300. Destiny 2 and Cyberpunk 2077 each took the efforts of over 500 people. Star Wars The Old Republic needed almost 800, and GTA 5 and Red Dead Redemption 2 both required over 1,000 people to make. Now, of course, those are all very large, very AAA games, but that's the fucking point. Sure, 400 definitely sounds like a lot of people to be working on a game, and in a vacuum it certainly is. But if you use an appropriate comparison with other similar sized games, all of a sudden it becomes pretty fucking normal and hardly unprecedented the way this guy is trying to make it sound. Yeah, big games need lots of people to make, thanks Professor, that's quite a shocker. Lastly, at number 5, we've got this gem. The licensed brand and world of one of the largest entertainment IPs in the world, Dungeons & Dragons, at the apex of its popularity in a movie. Oh, a movie? Well, why didn't you say so? I had forgotten all about the utterly crushing box office power of a fucking Dungeons & Dragons movie. Now, I won't try to argue that Dungeons & Dragons isn't popular, of course it is, but it's hardly the world-shifting commercial juggernaut that this dude is trying to imply that it is. It's an IP without a face, more of a system than a franchise. Anyone who actually knows about Baldur's Gate, which clearly does not include this dude, knows that just the name Baldur's Gate likely contributed far more to this game's popularity than the fact that it happens to use 5th edition Dungeons & Dragons rules. Nobody gives a fuck about that. I am exactly the type of nerd that type of thing is supposed to appeal to, and even I don't give a shit. To be clear, I'm sure there are people that do care about that. I'm just saying that when compared to the entire Baldur's Gate player base, they're likely a minority. Now, of course, Baldur's Gate itself is technically part of the Forgotten Realms campaign setting of Dungeons & Dragons, but how many people are really aware of that? Ultimately, my point is that if people are playing this game because of a handful of words, the ones that they care about are likely Baldur's Gate, not Dungeons & Dragons. And now we get to Twitter dev guy's closing statement with this banger. Larian is coming into this game swinging with a gigantic weight of expectation to deal with, but they're also doing it with an immense amount of wind at their backs. In an era of mega games, Baldur's Gate 3 is one of the largest attempted, built by a specialized group of people using mature tech specifically built to make this specific game, reinforced by invaluable mass player feedback and market validation ahead of its launch. This is not a new baseline for RPGs, this is an anomaly. Okay, so how the fuck is this an anomaly? Direct experience, resources, specialty tools, market validation? That sounds exactly like a AAA game to me. But Twitter guy isn't done. He elaborates and engages in further hysterics, saying, trying to do the same thing in the same way, especially without the same advantages, could kill an entire group of studios. So please celebrate the achievement represented by Baldur's Gate 3. It looks like a massive amount of effort is about to pay off in a big way for one of the brightest voices in the medium. But if you shout that every RPG should be like this going forward, you have no excuse. Well, you've not just missed the point, you've created the expectations and conditions to ensure your favorite creators may never be able to give you that thing you love ever again. Wow, this has got to be some of the most alarmist, sloppy, low-effort fear-mongering that I have seen in quite some time. My G, you're acting like you think customers are going to be making those demands of small, independent, private studios. No one is doing that. No one is expecting that from devs that size. Who the fuck is out here like, hell yeah, brother, let's bully this small team of 3 people because their indie pixel RPG isn't as big as Baldur's Gate 3. You're just being fucking silly. No one is gonna do that. No one has ever done that. The only types of games and studios people are concerned with meeting these bare minimum standards of quality are AAA ones. No one worries about indie devs because we know they actually care about making a good game. Unlike AAA studios, they hold themselves to their own standards. It's only AAA corpo devs with no standards but profit margins that we're concerned with. By trying to conflate the completely reasonable expectations people have for AAA games to be, God forbid, good and bug-free with their expectations for small self-funded indie studios is fucking ridiculous and dishonest. You're just running interference for Corpos, desperately hoping that if maybe you debase yourself enough defending them, perhaps they'll climb down from their ivory tower and pay a little attention to you, pin a nice ribbon on you or toss you some table scraps, give you a pat on the head. You're a sniveling, pathetic agent of the status quo, and this entire narrative is nothing but absurdist fear-mongering and gaslighting. Standards change all the time, you dumb fuck doorknob. What about Disco Elysium? That game blew everyone away, and that was just a small team. What about them? No one was clutching their pearls about boundary pushing then. Guys, as is so often the case, this whole situation here is exactly what it looks like. They're just trying to use this as an excuse to keep making shit games. It's no more complicated than that. People ask me all the time why I hate legacy media so much, and if access journalism really is controlling the industry narrative as much as I claim it does, and moreover, why they would do that. Well, you're looking at the answer to those questions right here. If they let a game like Baldur's Gate 3 get away with being this fucking good without using any of the accepted industry scumbag monetization schemes, without offering any pushback, then, well, it throws off their whole scale. Why do you think so many of the big boys are all publishing these review in progress stories instead of actual full reviews? Go to Metacritic right now. Look how many major publishers have their fucking reviews posted. It's not a lot. That's likely because they're trying to stall to figure out what the fuck to do. They know that giving Baldur's Gate 3 a 9 or a 10 will devalue all the other recent games they gave those type of scores to, and it'll give the game away. They know it will make their 7s and 8s look like 4s, 5s, and 6s. How are you going to explain giving Final Fantasy VII Remake the same score you gave to Baldur's Gate 3? This is the problem with allowing the standards to get hiked up again. It's been an industry project of the last decade or so to convince customers to accept worse and worse games, to tolerate garbage no one should ever be asked to put up with, to be content with being sold unfinished products, to normalize paying more money for things that used to just be stock features of a game. So when something like Baldur's Gate 3 comes along and threatens to tear down that whole clever illusion that industry mouthpieces have spent so long carefully constructing with gaslighting and deceptive journalism, yeah, they're gonna panic. See, Corpos will get shook anytime that a truly good game risks reminding customers what it looks like when the companies their money keeps in business actually give a fuck about them. And by the way they're rushing and tripping over each other to make excuses and qualify the success and scope of Baldur's Gate 3, shit, you know it's gotta be a fucking banger. So yeah, be afraid, Corpos. Be very afraid. We'd love to see it. Alright, that's our show. Thanks so much for chilling with us tonight. We love you today. We love you all the fucking way, baby. Are you guys all playing Baldur's Gate? Let us know how you're feeling about it in the comments down below. I've got about 20 hours in so far. I just hit Act 2. I'm having a great time, but man, I gotta be honest, I fucking hate the isometric style view and click to move controls. Hopefully someone mods in WASD movement soon, because otherwise, this motherfucker slaps. That is it for me though. Have an awesome weekend, everybody. Play some Baldur's Gate 3 and we'll catch you next week.
Woke up, smoke up, blunt, then I pass out. Pass out. Woke up, what up, smoke up, blunt, then I'm back down. Back down. What? Woke up, smoke up, blunt, then I pass out. Pass out. Woke up, what up, smoke up, blunt, then I'm